Hi there, graders. This is Misano. Today we're going to be talking, our reading lesson is going to be about juicy words. Thinking about using juicy words as we read and using juicy words as we can eventually use them in our writing. So I've got a book today. It's called A Bad Case of the Stripes by David Shannon. It's a really good one. It's got some amazing words in here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to pick out one of these words to talk about what your activity for today is going to be after you read one of your books. So here we go. A Bad Case of the Stripes. Camilla Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. Ooh, that was a good one. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. I wonder about what? Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. "Oh, my heavens," she cried. "You're completely covered in stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered. "But just look at me." "You get back into bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he explained. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crayon and the Knight of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out into stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" And a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you can change channels on a TV. Oh, I see some camouflage in there. Someone must have called camouflage. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, let's see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I better bring in specialists. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grope, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young. Then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not the mumps, concluded Dr. Grope. Or the measles, said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not chicken pox, put in Dr. Cricket. Or sunburn, said Dr. Young. Try these, said the specialist. Each handed her a bottle filled with 5 different colored pills. Take one each before bed, said Dr. Grope. Then they filed out the door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she didn't feel different. But when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with her face on it. Oh my goodness, this is going from bad to worse for her. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Dr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers, then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, fizzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. Or possibly some form of bacteria, said Dr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or could it be a fungus? Added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. We need to go over these numbers back at the lab, Dr. Gord explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. Oh boy. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out in the front lawn. This is big time. The Creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from the psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, psychics, and an old medicine man, a guru, and even a vegetarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She had sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long, furry tail, but nothing worked. Look at her. She's a mess. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth. Her nose was a dresser, and her 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. You know what the word sob means? That could be one of your words you do with your activity. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. I hope so. Cross your fingers. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head, what have we here is a bad case of the stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big, heaping plate full of lima beans, more than just about anything. But she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the old woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she's been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait!" she cried. "The truth is, I love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Said Camilla. "Look at this." Suddenly the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. "I'm cured," she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere." She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished from the crowd. Afterwards, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had a touch of the stripes again. The end of The Bad Case of the Stripes. So, there's a lesson in this book. But before we talk about that, here's your work for today. What I want you to do is I want you to grab a sheet of paper, and on the sheet of paper, you're going to divide it into 4 parts. In the middle, I want you to draw kind of a rectangular box. In the middle here is going to go your juicy or your word maybe that you didn't know what it was and you want to learn what it was. So then in the upper corner, you're going to write the sentence from the book, the sentence that the word was in. Then over here, you're going to find either a synonym or an antonym of your word. Remember, a synonym means the same as, an antonym means the opposite or different. Then you're going to draw a picture of the word as best you can. And then last but not least, you're coming up with a sentence that's going to use that word. So let me show you. I did one. So the word I picked was bacteria. I thought that was a pretty good one since we're hearing all about bacteria with the coronavirus. So in the first spot is the sentence from the book. So I went back into the book and copied it. And it was, "Oh, possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Melon. "Out pop squiggly little bacteria tails." Then I went and I found a synonym for this book. Synonym means the same. So a word that might mean the same as bacteria would be a bug, not a bug that you would see with legs and flies, or a germ. So those two means a synonym. Then what I did is I found a picture of a whole bunch of bacteria. This is a picture of a little boy who touched a part from a swing set, and then he went and took it and put his hand in a little petri dish, and here's all the bacteria that grew just from when he was on the swing set. And then last but not least, here's my sentence, a sentence that I came up with to use the word bacteria. And it is, "The bacteria infected all of the people on the trip." So I'm going to use all these parts to help me create my sentence. So your job today is to, if you have a sheet of paper, you can draw this, or if you are really good on the Chromebook in Docs, you can draw this out using lines, or maybe if your teacher's got you, if you want to do something in a different way to also replicate this or make it look like this, but a picture is just fine. So what you're going to do is you're going to complete it, then you're going to take a picture of it and share it, or you can do it right on your doc and share it with your teacher. We can't wait to see what kind of words you're going to come up with after reading one of your favorite books. Now, before we go, the lesson in this book, I want you to think for just a minute. What do you think the lesson is from this book? Tell someone at home. We'll see you next time. Happy reading.